back to another live stream. Really excited about this one. Sorry if my Wi-Fi is terrible because I'm in Berlin. My hotel has very bad Wi-Fi, but very, very nice to be here once again with Philip and Gabriel. We have done quite a lot of live streams in the past. I met Gabriel just last week in Berlin at VR Devs. Shout out to VR Devs. Good conference. Too big for me, but it was really nice. Met a lot of lovely people. But no, like, very excited about this stream. We're talking about embeddable elements. So we're going to talk a lot about that, but a little bit of context. You can check out the links in the description below. I'll add it on Twitter and LinkedIn as well in just a minute. There's a new product hunt launch. So that's what we're doing today. And I'll let the team, share more about it in a bit. But let's kick off with some intro. Oh, and we're also doing a giveaway of 5 swag boxes.
We are.
A Keychron keyboard. If you want to learn more about that, you can check the Discord server of We Make Devs or the Telegram channel. But in short, whatever you learned in this session, you can share it on socials, tag permit. The social media handles can also be found in the description below. And would also appreciate your love and support with the product hunt launch. So yeah, if you can check it out, give your feedback, honest feedback, any thoughts, questions, upvote if you like, on your call. But let's start with some intros. Gabriel and Philip. Maybe Gabriel, you want to go first, and then Philip?
Yeah, my name is Gabriel. I'm leading the developer relations at Permit. I'm doing development for more than 12 years now. And happy to be here today, talk about embeddable elements. As Kunal said, we are doing a product hunt launch today. We'll appreciate any support with upvote, with comment. Whatever you do is grateful.
And that's me. So hey, everyone. My name is Philip Grabowski, or otherwise known as Developer Philip. I am also a software engineer as my background. Started my career at Cisco in San Jose in the Bay Area, or otherwise known Silicon Valley. Currently, I'm a developer advocate at Permit.io, helping along with the marketing efforts and the advocacy, trying to get people to understand what authorization is and its importance. But also I'm known on YouTube. So you might have seen some of my videos where I talk about web development and specifically creative web development. And in general, super excited to be here. And I'm excited to talk to you about what we're launching today. And as Gabriel said, all support is appreciated. And as a teaser, there's a great video that you should check out on the page.
Yeah, that was really cool. I believe last time as well, you did like a funny video. It's really nice. But now people should learn how you do product hunt launches. A little bit more about that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Permit Sheriff suite, how that is different from other access control solutions that are currently available in the market, and what is it that's new with this launch, and what are you doing?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe I can give like a direction, and then Gabriel can kind of jump into the nitty details. But in general, Permit.io is an authorization company, and we solve the problem of building your access control. So implementing solutions into your system that allows us to specify who can do what in very, very short terms. And in general, based on this solution and our no-code solution that we currently have, we're launching elements today, specifically access control elements that are embeddable. So there are UI components that you can just integrate within the Permit app, and you can copy the code and paste them into your application and have them literally work out of the box. So that's the whole idea. There is no complication behind it. There is no really complex access control to be mastered here for any developers. This is a very developer-friendly product, a very friendly product for other stakeholders as well, not just developers. So your product managers, also your directors, or whoever else might be part of your company and part of your team. It is tailored specifically to them. So the idea here is that we're offering these elements, things like, things very similar to things that maybe Stripe does with their embeddable elements, or things that Google Maps does with their embeddable elements. And there's so many other kind of companies that went this embeddable element route, and we're doing that for authorization. Because here is that authorization is very, very difficult just for someone to understand. or get the foot in the door, basically. And here we're just offering solutions, very nice UI and UX solutions that allows anyone to really control of their authorization in a simple way. And maybe Gabriel, you can add more detail on that.
Yeah, sure. So as Philip mentioned, our main mission in having this launch of Permit Sheriff and Permit Elements is make fine-grained authorization accessible for developers. Since there are various levels of developer here, I'll say in short that fine-grained authorization is a term that allows you to check what a user can do in a fine-grained manner. Not like, okay, admin can do anything and users can only read document. You can make an accurate authorization decision based on what you have here. But fine-grained authorization could be complex, especially for users to manage their permissions. If you're familiar with Google Drive, for example, you probably know that the experience of giving people permissions to your documents, to your slides, whatever it is, it's very easy there. You always have this pop-up that you can open and you can say, okay, I want to share it with this person. I want to give them the particular permission on that. Building this mechanism in your application, which is something that mostly any application needs, can take months. And Permit Elements, and specifically Permit Sheriff, is aimed to provide you the exact experience with single lines of code.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Philip and Gabriel. Before we move on to some more questions, and by the way, the audience, you can ask questions in the live chat as well. And if you want to check it out, it's all in the links are in the description. Do you think we can maybe do a quick demo, Gabriel?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start the demo now with, and I'll try to explain. If there are comments regarding the demo, I'll ask Philip or Kunal to interrupt me so I can answer it interactively. So what we can see here, let me show that here. What we can see here is Permit Policy Editor. Permit Policy Editor, as you can see here, is a comprehensive editor that you can edit and configure what a user can do in the application. This Sheriff is not about the policy, because you probably know, if you already met Permit, you probably know that our policy editor is very friendly for you as a developer, so you can configure very easily the permission in your app. Here we can see a simple banking application example. So for example, you have here account, transaction, you're all familiar with that. But as you might know, the configuration of permissions for your users, when you want to delegate your users' ability to manage permissions by their own, it's writing a lot of code in your application. And this is where the elements came in, and specifically the Sheriff elements. I want to focus today in three kinds of elements. The first one is the account members management. So let's assume that you want your users to manage themselves, their accounts, they manage themselves, the beneficiary in their account. This is where the user management elements came into the picture. So you can configure it here. You can configure which user can assign roles to which users. You can configure it to be RBAC role for coarse-grained authorization. You can configure it for RBAC role for fine-grained authorization, and you can of course customize it. If you look in here, you can have a custom theming, so you can customize exactly how it looks like. That's the first element I would focus in today. The other one is that we call approval flow elements. You probably all know this kind of dialogue from Google Drive, right? So you want to get access to a document, you want to do a wire transfer, then you see this pop-up where you can request access for something in your application. Just think how cool is it that you can actually create private screen in your app, but screens that users can actually ask another user, say, I need access to this screen. We'll see it all live in action soon. And here also you can configure everything, the messages, the color, the way that the element is look like. Also, we have approval flow or operation approval element. Think about a flow in your application that you want some operations to be approved by other users. For example, if a user wants to do a wire transfer, then we want other user to ask for this wire transfer, right? So this is another element. Again, as you can see here, I can change the color, I can configure everything. Very nice way to configure it all, and you can of course make it match to your application. We have also a way to configure light mode and dark mode, whatever you want. So you are configuring these elements, and let's see how they actually incorporate in a banking demo application live. So here I have an example, a very simple example of a banking application. As you can see here, we have the account of Avinash. Avinash want to add more users to their account. For example, Avinash want David to be beneficiary in their account. So they can go here. As you can see here, you can see the secured by permit IO. You can see that Avinash can do a self-service management of users. See how cool is it? You don't need to write any code to have Avinash managing his a bank account or whatever your app users. You just put the element here, as you see I configured it, and then you can add users. So now Avinash add user as an account member. I can tell you a secret. Account member can view the balance in the account, but can't do transaction. And here we are in the David website. Switch the window. You can see that it's now David. I hope the window is switched. Philip, can you approve that David's account is
yes,
deactivated?
we can see David, correct.
Amazing. So as you can see, David can see their own account, but because they are members in Avinash account, they can also see Avinash's account. If we go to Avinash account, we see that permit change the view here. So here we block the view on transaction. But now David also want to get to transactions in Avinash account. So they can click on the request access. If you remember this element also, is just what we configure. Think about the flow of having private screen and having this button, and where in the database I send this button, all you get out of box from permit. So you implement this element and you have this button. If I click here, request access, the request is sent to Avinash now. Let's refresh Avinash page. And now when I'll go to Avinash user management account, I'll be able to see, voila, that Gabriel David is asking for a beneficiary type of permission. I want to approve David as a beneficiary, so I approve them as a beneficiary. And if we are going back here and just change our account again to see Avinash account, remember David is a beneficiary, whoops, we can see now the transactions in Avinash. Not only that, so we saw the user management, we saw how user can request access, but what if David will try to do a large transaction from Avinash account? Let's try to do a large transaction, more than £1,000, and see what happened here. As you can imagine, if David wants to do transactions from Avinash's account, they will need to ask for approval. Just think about the flow. So if you have to code it everything in your DB, so you have to open a transaction in your DB and then wait for this transaction. See, here we just had the element of approval required. And let's write Avinash now why we actually need this transaction. I need this money to get app votes. And then I will click request transfer approval. And when we go back to Avinash account and click on review wire transfer, we can see that Avinash can see this transaction out. So, and again, this is also an element. You don't have to write any line of code that worry about the logic, because in all the application, the logic is the same. Only what changes your configuration and the elements. As you can see here, Avinash can approve or deny the transaction. Avinash don't want transaction, although don't want app votes. So of course, he don't want to pay for app votes. He want to get app votes because his product is actually a great one. So that was a small hint. It will deny the transaction. Of course, they can approve it. But as you can see here, all the logic is just single lines of code that you need to write in your application to implement all this comprehensive, fine-grained access sheriff logic.
That's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing. My one question is, like, can you also automate this? Like, you showed the UI and stuff, but what if you want to like trigger it via like code?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yes,
everything in permit is a developer-oriented tool. So everything you see in Permit is API-driven. Whatever you saw now as a UI, you can just do it with API calls. Not only that, think about, for example, there are some approval management systems out there, let's say ServiceNow, and your organization probably might work with these approval management flows. Using the API, you can just integrate it in a circular way for anywhere in your application, and probably get the approval flow work together with any kind of other system that you want to work with.
Cool. And regarding the components, can you make your own like components, or is it like agnostic to what kind of framework you're using?
So you with the components that we offer, you have first of all, the components that we provide, they're fully customizable. So first of all, you have the power to change the colors, to kind of almost in some way make it your own. So that is the possibility there. Also, because everything is API driven, of course, you're getting that full functionality via the API. So if you really want to, realistically, you could, but really that is not suggested. Technically, the customization options that we do provide, they give you everything that you need out of the box. So really, you can make it your own very, very simply, and just still end up using that iframe snippet that we provide, just to put it into your code and just have it work out of the box.
Cool. All right, we are getting some questions here. There's one. Need to know source authorization metrics, which depends on hardware, software as a gate pass. Can we consider it as application gateway and more?
Yeah, go for it, Gabriel.
Yeah, so of course, Permit, as I said, everything configurable, and you can also connect it to your API gateway. So you can have it with integration, no matter with what API gateway you work with, you can connect it to your API gateway, and then you can streamline the permission. So the API gateway will get the same authorization decision as your application.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit more about the impact on software development, right? How have we, first of all, who came up with the idea? And if you faced any challenges, like what led to the initial thought, like, okay, we need this, and in what ways did you imagine embedded elements would simplify the development process compared to, let's say, the traditional methods that people are used to?
So really, I think to answer this question, it's good to give a comparison what authorization looks like in a software space where you don't have tools like Permit. Now, authorization in general is quite a difficult thing to grasp, because not only that you have to work with a policy engine that can understand the code that you write, or the policies or the rules, the configuring that you want to enforce within your application, you also have to write those rules in a specific language that the policy engine will understand. And as you can see here, we already have two boundaries that we have to cross in order just to be able to write permissions. Now, the most common policy engine out there is called OPA, the Open Policy Agent, and that requires you or any engineer that is developing code for it to understand to learn Rego code, which in itself is a little bit complex to learn. It's not a simple learning curve to cross by for any developer. So as you can imagine, this is time consuming. Now, the whole idea where Permit originated from was to stop developers writing that code, to take that away from them, right? So that's why Permit developed their no-code UI. That's why Permit developed their dashboard. And that's why Permit gave the developers the flexibility to work with multiple policy models, the models that allow you to write the specific rules and not write any code that obviously is associated with developing authorization. Now, to answer the question where the idea came from, well, authorization, I'd say in some ways it's a never-ending story. It always gets more difficult as your requirements grow within the company. And a lot of people start to realize that too late. There's a lot of companies out there which went to the path of developing permissions and authorization themselves, trying to write something in-house. And unfortunately, very quickly, they come to realize that as their requirements grow, as the company scales, as different stakeholders within the company come forward with different requirements of how they want to manage permissions, suddenly it can get very overwhelming, especially if you're not just working with simple policy models like RBAC, which stands for role-based access control, which is the simplest policy model, but also when you're starting to work with things like ABAC, so attribute-based access control, reback, making sure that permissions are managed based on relationships, and then further on, even combining all these policy models together to make them work. As you can imagine, it gets overwhelming very, very quickly, especially if you're new to all this stuff and an engineer that just got assigned to work with this. Now imagine having to learn all of this and then also getting a requirement to create a end user UI that you have to showcase to only users with only specific roles where they can manage other users and assign other roles to them. Can you see how recursive this is getting? And this is really where the kind of problem originated. We wanted to not just offer it to developers, but also offer it to but also offer it to other end users and other developers, of not having to go through the hassle of writing all of this UI and developing everything and having to think about the recursiveness of permissions, but realistically just to create something that they can configure very easily and just plop into their application and have it work out of the box. Really, that is the whole idea. So that's kind of where it all came from. Really, the principle of all of this is just to abstract away from the complexity of permissions and really give developers a nice way into authorization, a nice way into permission management, and give them a better day, as such, I'll say, so they don't pull all their hair out.
Yeah, and when we talk about measuring success, for example, then what do you think are some of the for developers and companies, like key metrics and indicators that they use to measure success when implementing the solution? Like, how has that changed, or like what? Yeah, if you could quantify it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think realistically the best way to measure success when developing your software product is to listen to your end customers and see how much help you're giving them in their daily development life cycle. And authorization here again is one of those building blocks that a lot of engineers are starting to realize that there's a problem. I always like to tell this story, and I might as well just say it again. Like, for example, if we go back, I don't know, 7 years, I remember I was at college, and I remember implementing my own authentication solution. So like logging in and doing everything in PHP, right? And we didn't have other solutions that did this. So I ended up building one myself. But realistically, how secure was it? How good was it? It wasn't. It wasn't at all. And then obviously time went by, and all these companies started building something that we now use as a centric building block of any application. We're like, okay, well, we need an authorization system. We need an authentication system, and we're going to use this tool for it. And that's kind of the fundamentals. And here we're starting to see engineers realize that authorization is the next thing that is part of this whole kind of component block building of any kind of centric and important application. And realistically, it's becoming much more important because security is becoming much more important nowadays. So it's about how we kind of approach this and manage this. So really, any of the feedback that we get from our end users is the most kind of valuable thing we have for evaluating how important this is and how much need for it there is. And really, we're also constantly listening to people on different forums, on all the social media, of expressing their frustration with authorization. And it's becoming a common thing, and people don't realize that. It's a common thing that you see on a daily basis nowadays. People really getting frustrated with not having a solution that just works out of the box. So that's kind of where we come from, and we hear this, we see it, we get great feedback, so we know we're doing something right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've seen, like, especially around the security space at KubeCon as well. It's always, like, since past like 3-4 KubeCons that I've attended, it's always the center of discussion. Getting some questions here, which is it free?
Yes. Permit.io is free, and we have a very generous free tier. So realistic evaluate as part of our pricing model is the amount of users that you're checking permissions against, or more correctly, the amount of unique identities you're checking permissions against. And up to 1,000 monthly identities, it's absolutely free. So realistically, for anyone trying to play around with the product and see how it works, or even do a POC within their company, you really don't have to worry about pricing. And all the features are available to you.
Is there, yeah, thanks for sharing, Philip. Is there a tree available, or what is the best way to check this out in action?
Yeah, so absolutely. Check it out is just go to app.perme.io and then you sign up and then you get everything with the UI that I showed you. There are examples of code. I can share one with you, the one that I actually show. Let me find, where is it? We'll share it after the demo, but we have the docs.perme.io. If you go there, docs.perme.io, then there you find the elements. You have all the documentation there with all the code examples and everything. And again, the most easiest way to manage it is just go to app.perme.io, start play with it yourself. The system is very intuitive.
Cool. Abhishek is asking, what authentication mechanisms is it using?
So Permit is an authentication mechanism agnostic. You can use any kind of authentication mechanism out there, from self-implementation using tokens to Clerk, Auth0, Stage, whatever authentication. We are agnostic to that. You just passing the JWT or the user ID, and then you can use that.
Cool. Is it open sourced? Someone is asking.
So Permit.io is based on open source product called Opal. This is actually the engine behind Permit.io. The elements themselves, we are considering open it, but we need to make it more stable before we open it. What open now is our SDKs. All our SDKs is open, so you don't have to suffer any kind of closed source. And as I said intentionally, beforehand, Permit is a very developer-focused product, and we appreciate that developers investigate themselves. Every time you use Permit, you'll find all the code, you'll find everything that will make you a breeze to use that.
Yeah, and I did a video on Opal and Permit, so if you want to learn more, check that out. There are some more questions, which is, hold on. Can you provide examples of the types of applications and scenarios where Permit Sheriff would be particularly useful?
Philip, you want to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for example, as part of the demo, with Permit Sheriff, you get realistically two main elements. You get access requests and operation approvals. Now, let's break these down. So access request is essentially a situation where you need to have someone essentially request access to a specific resource that you're working with. Now, what can that resource be? Well, it can be a document, it can be a file, it can be a specific action you're performing, a document, a file, a specific action on a specific resource. So in this case, for example, I might be wanting to access a specific file within a folder. And this is like the common Google Drive example, right? And maybe I don't have the ability to access it, so I request approval to be able to go access it, maybe view it, and so on and so forth. Then we have operation approval. This is when I want to perform some kind of operation. In this case, maybe we want to send a wire transfer to another user, or maybe I want to have the ability to badge in to a specific door within a company building, for example. Maybe as I badge in, I have to wait for the approval of someone to essentially come and let the door open. This could be another example. So really, it applies to a lot of real-life use cases. It also applies to a lot of use cases when the applications. Realistically, every time you have a flow where you need to restrict access to a specific resource and you need to get the approval of that user, or if you need to restrict access to a specific action that the user performing and you need to get approval on that action, this is where these two elements will come in. And then therefore, these two elements work together and you have the main user management kind of screen, which is also an element that you just embed as an iframe, where you or your manager, in this case, or the specific role that has control over those elements within your organization can look into it and then can give and approve or deny the specific requests coming in. So I hope that kind of answered that question.
Yep. Thanks for sharing, Philip. And folks, if you want to check out the Product Crunch launch, check out the links in the description. Make sure you give it a vote and share your comments. But I have a question around like integrating the embedded components, specifically into existing applications. how does one do that without disrupting their current workflows? Like any best practices or things to keep in mind?
Do you want to take this one?
Can you repeat the question, Kunal? Not focused.
Yeah, so folks who are planning to integrate the embedded components into existing applications, are there any sort of like best practices you recommend without them disrupting their current workflows?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's actually coming a lot in customer meetings or people you know that you already have the legacy. One of the nice things with Permit is that we always try to minimize the footprint in your application code when you do stuff. And a good strategy to start with a new or with extending your authorization is starting with dry runs. Since permit check function is just enforcing in a very simple way the permissions in your app, you not must start with enforcing. You can start with calling this function, and then you collect how things happen with your current permissions, and then you can improve and improve and improve them. One of the most important things with permit is that we decouple the configuration from the code. So if you want to change the configuration, have better configuration in your app, you don't need to change anything particularly on your code. So what we are recommending is like lift and shift strategy. So what you have today, that's good. You want to improve that. So you start small and then you grow with your need in your app. The elements are actually a big enabler for this one because the elements do not must break your current authorization. They can just help you make this authorization more friendly for developers. And then when you decide to replace the backend authorization of your product with permit product, that could be very easy.
To add on top of that, usually and this is an interesting that we usually recommend to any kind of customer who's eager to implement permit into their system. Obviously, that question comes up, okay, but how do I implement this? How do I not break my current authorization system that I've written in-house that we want to expand and obviously use permit? And the best principle and the kind of thing that we always offer here is just to start off by building on top of what you currently have. Now, because permit is completely separated from everything else, that is the essentially factor that allows you to create, for example, let's assume you have an enforcement in your application that you've written yourself in-house, and you want to create another enforcement, check how permit works. Well, you can just do that enforcement in the same place or on top of it, and then you can compare the results within the permit dashboard from the logs that you have and also from your own solution. And you can see that once those authorization checks start to match up, once you get the same result, that really helps the customer build up confidence that, oh, this is actually working well and we don't have to worry about it. And regardless, the implementation of it was so simple because realistically enforcing something within your code is just one-liner SDK function that we provide, and it just kind of works. So in general, that kind of implementation is very simple, and it's very fail-proof, really.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Gabriel and Philip. I know you mentioned about I've seen this as well, like abstraction being the future. But as a company, like how do you balance the ease of use for end users, but also developers and administrators, they need like the robust functionality. So where do you draw the line when it comes to like how much abstraction is enough? And that's maybe bringing to my next question around future. Like, where are we going to get more and more abstracted, or is there any like trade-off between abstraction and robust functionality? What are some of the things you keep in mind when doing these launches and new products? Especially
this is a great question, and it really hit the kind of advocacy side of it, because as a developer advocate, me and Gabriel kind of obviously we share a similar role. We have to think about the end user. We have to think about the developer and his experience within the product. So as part of implementing something and making something look great and awesome and very kind of impressive with its UI, you really have to still step into the developer's shoes and remember that this thing has to be very usable. This thing has to be very logical, so it applies exactly how the developer wants into how they think about often, and sometimes that also can be a little bit difficult. And really, it's about finding the right balance point. Of course, abstraction is very common with a lot of kind of SaaS solutions nowadays, especially when we see a lot of no-code tools. But like I said, you have to find the right balance of how much you abstract and how much details you leave in. At the end of the day, too much abstraction takes away too much detail and therefore makes it too complex to use. Even though you think it might be easier, actually it becomes more difficult because you're not giving enough information to your end user. So really part of the solution here and part of winning this kind of abstraction war and balance of how to make it right is by really understanding your end customer. For us, that's mostly developers who are actually going to be using this product. So they need to understand it from a developer perspective. They need to know that they are backed by all the developer tools here. They need to know that we support all the API integrations as well. We support all the SDKs as part of the beautiful UI, but we also give them the beautiful UI. And that's how you really strike the balance. You have to nail all the fundamentals first that the developer would want as part of what they're familiar with, and then give them even more on top of that, which is the nice UI and making these simple processes even simpler, really.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Philip. But yeah, like it's an abstraction is not something that is new. Like cloud, they did it for virtual machines, Kubernetes did it for containers, and now platforms are doing it for applications. So I think we have been abstracting things away like for a while now, but it's just interesting to see. But let's talk a little bit more about the whole, future outlook. How do you see the role of access control evolving? Let's say if we talk about next 5 years, and how is permit positioned, to adapt to these changes?
That's a lovely question, Kunal. And the reason that I love it is because I am suffering authorization since 2015 in various jobs in the industry. And thinking about bright future is always fun for people, who struggle same problem for years. So what we are seeing now, especially in the engineering field, that this fine-grained authorization is growing and growing. There is two main niche in that. The first one, you might heard about it, Google Zanzibar. And the second is, you might heard about it, is open policy agent and policy-based approach. Permit decided that our main goal in the market is to do not let developers being security experts. We don't want developer, and we understand that developer want to get focused in developing features, developing products, do cool stuff, learn a lot about Gen AI. They don't want to do security. They probably don't want to do authorization. So we try to make authorization a breeze so they will have fun with what they need to do and decouple what they actually don't need to do from permit. So in the 5 years, what we can see first is the amounts of data that we are processing will continue to grow exponentially. Plus, we'll have much more types of users in our application, non-human users, right? We already see Gen AI bots, but actually bots that we want them in our application. And third, we also see the architectures became very distributed, very decentralized. And fourth, we see the users worry about their privacy. Users today want to own their data, want to make sure that the data is private and no one has access for. So if I'm looking 5 years, all this trend will continue to grow and more application developers will want to have the best fine-grained permissions in their application. With this fine-grained permission, the main thing that we expecting to happen is a developer would want to adopt a software like permit, and we will invest a lot to create the simplest authorization layer that developers can have.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for sharing, Gabriel. But yeah, that's completely, resonated with my thoughts. And I don't know about you, but 5 years doesn't look like a really long time to me, like compared to the previous 5 years, for example. But if we're talking about the emerging trends, like in software development, like the generic stuff aside, if I just talk about embedded elements, like those offered by like Permit.io, how do you think that will drive the further adoption? Like, what are current trends you see in the industry, or is it just the similar what you mentioned before? With this new launch, like how have you positioned it to like future proof, or where I'm getting?
Sorry.
Right. So we always want to think about what end users will essentially require and how we can make the adoption of a product not just simpler for them, but also how we can make the adoption of a product more appealing to them. Now, the appealing factor is important because it's hard to hit the right everyone. So realistically here, the idea is to give people more options that they can work with. At the end of the day, authorization problems are extremely difficult. They're hard for engineers to get their head around, especially if these problems are very, very complex, especially internal. And therefore, sometimes with the tools out there, they might feel like they're limited into what specific companies are offering. So expanding that array of the tools that we offer. So in this case, offering all these elements, so all these extra components, ease the implementation of specific features, and that ease the implementation of handling the complex authorization logic, and really telling the developer, hey, you know what, you can take a breather now, because all you have to do is just take this element and plop it into your code and it will work. Well, it's a great way to not just save time for the developer, save him a headache, and also save time for the developer's time within the company of actually trying to develop something in-house, but really we're just giving them something out of the box. So really it's about, you know, the expansion of the offering that we currently have. And of course, we will continue to do that. There's going to be more elements that will come to the space as well, that's going to cover all the specific parts of authorization and give them to the end user as an embeddable element. But also, you know, we're going to focus on specifically listening to the end user audience and implementing things that they actually, and that's the beauty about being in a startup as well. We can listen to the engineers and we can take their feedback very seriously, and then therefore we can also prioritize things depending on that feedback. So really, what the engineer is getting is their voice heard and things coming out that are relevant. So this is what we're going to see within the next couple of years as we move forward. Listening to the community, expanding the array of features that we offer, and listen to the community specifically of what they need in authorization.
Couldn't agree more. And for folks who already use Permit or are new, if you want to see any improvements or new features, you can comment it on the product hunt launch, because I think that's one of the reasons people do launches, is to gather feedback from the community members, and the links can be found in the description below. Yeah, getting some comments here and there. Yeah, there are documentations that you can check out. I believe we answered this question already, the main benefits of using Permit Sheriff compared to building components from scratch. This was answered. So one last question is around the security measures in place to protect user data within embedded elements.
Gabriel, I think that's a perfect question tailored to you.
Yeah, can you repeat that, please? Sorry.
How do the elements handle sensitive information?
Oh, that's a very good question, because one of the things with Permit is that we are separating the data of the users than the data of the configuration of the policy. Everything in the elements themselves that related to private data is actually passed between the policy decision point. I don't want to dive too deep into a Permit architecture, but it's actually only with a container that actually run locally, and that they're not exposed to Permit. And then your users actually private data is just between Permit Cloud, which is very secure. It has SOC 2 and ISO standards. We are highly secured cloud product.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. And those are all the questions we had. I will be making some, social posts as well regarding the product hunt launch, sharing my opinions. But this was really fun, and I'm sure we'll get to do more chat in the future. For folks who want to learn more, join the Permit community. If you have any other questions, you can directly ask the Permit team. Check out the product hunt launch, give it an upvote, give your feedback, and just play around with it and have fun. It's an open source community driven by open source, free for you to get started with. So yeah, check it out, and let us know what you think. Once again, thanks a lot for joining, Philip and Gabriel. Really interesting way how you do product hunt launches, like with the videos and stuff. If you haven't checked out the video yet, make sure you do. It's on the launch page. Really cool.
Yeah,
Mind check
please do. Please do.
previous.
Check out the video. Let us know what you think of it, and let us know what you think of the product. Any comments coming forward our way is the best feedback we can have and the best support we can get. Even if it's things that, even if it's criticism, we still accept that. It's still amazing for us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining, folks, and see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye bye.